All right, you guys, day 4. We are rolling. Can't believe this is like the halfway. This is the over halfway point. So congrats on making it this far. Yesterday was a little bit more tangible in terms of the science of like the what's with the eating. Today we're going to go back into a little bit more of kind of an emotional and a mindset space. So day 4 is all about triggers. And those of you that have a little bit more of an experience with, um, like if you have knowledge around eating disorders or background with EDs, you might know some of this stuff. You definitely don't have to have that background to be able to benefit from the lessons in this. But I just want to preface that some of this stuff might feel on different levels for some of us. Okay. So cues and triggers. We have trigger foods, and that is where the food itself sets off a course of overeating or potentially restriction. Generally, trigger foods are going to be more calorie dense, highly palatable foods, combinations of sugar and fat or fat and salt. So things like ice cream, cookies, potato chips, French fries, right? Those are the things that we tend to overeat without thinking. I don't know the last time somebody munched on a bunch of broccoli mindlessly. Not saying it doesn't happen, but generally speaking, they're going to be the more palatable ones. So research suggests that exposure to a certain trigger food activates particular areas of the brain that are involved with the body's reward system, right? So these are the foods that are highly it feels like a treat, right? It feels special in some way, shape, or form. They shouldn't be misconstrued, or they shouldn't be confused, I guess, with favorite foods, comfort foods, right? Things that are linked to a sense of home or contentment, or food cravings, right? Like my body is really low on carbs today, so that's what I am craving. With a true trigger food, it's the food itself, not an emotion or a situation that triggers whatever the response is, whether that is overeating or restricting. For example, like open the bag of potato chips and overeating occurs regardless of what your mood is or the time of day or the place. I personally think that trigger foods in and of themselves are fairly rare. I think generally speaking, these things are tied to some sort of emotion, but there is science and truth to like the food companies that produce these processed foods have done a lot of research in terms of like, what does the packaging need to look like? What is the exact combination of saltiness to savory to sweet, flavor to the crunch that it needs to make when it goes into your mouth and when you chew it? Like, they have done a ton of research on how to make these things highly palatable and desirable. So there is science behind that. But I just think that there's also a lot of truth to saying if you're mindful, you're not automatically doomed by the power of that, right? But it is something just to be aware of as a potential, like, oh, I am more likely to overeat this specific food, kind of regardless of what I might be thinking or feeling. A lot of times avoidance is one of the better ways that people deal with that. Just try to, like, if I know that that is a weak spot for me, I try to not be around it as much. And that's fine, but I think an even better and stronger way to do this is to engage in mindful eating, right? To really allow yourself to slow down and enjoy the food and listen to, when am I actually full? And when am I feeling satisfied around this? Okay. Second one is going to be feelings. So trigger feeling is an emotion, whether that's good or bad, that sets off a certain response, whether that is overeating, restricting, or purging. And purging, you guys, doesn't have to look like, it can look like a lot of different things, right? It could be over exercise, essentially. Like, I ate a hamburger last night, so I need to go run it off in the gym this morning. That would be considered a type of purge, so to speak, or like trying to, burn off. Get rid of would be the definition there. So susceptibility to emotional triggers is going to vary among individuals, right? And it's very common, I think, that emotions and food choices are linked together. And it's okay that food is an emotional thing and that it's not just fuel, right? Food has been social and has been comfort for a very long time. And I think it can be those things. But when we use it when we don't let it do its job, and we're overusing it, or we're using it to actually avoid emotion instead of soothe, that's when I think we tend to get in more trouble, right? So to manage trigger feelings, avoidance really isn't an answer. It's really important to actually identify the specific emotion that initiates the response, and then develop positive strategies and coping mechanisms with that emotion that don't involve food. We are going to work on this later in the week as well. Right now, it's just something that I want you to understand. And we're going to start to really dive into, are we being triggered, and what is my response to being triggered? Okay, a third type of trigger is going to be trigger environments. So this would be a specific situation or place that tends to set off a response, whether that's overeating or restricting. And this is generally going to be more habitual, right? When we talked about kind of those habitual cravings. So common examples of this include like walking into a movie theater and going to, grabbing the big thing of popcorn and the major soda, and you're done with it by the time you're out, even if you weren't hungry. Going to a buffet restaurant or like an all you can eat. Maybe it could be, a sporting event, or visiting a relative, or holidays, right? There's a lot of things that are habitually places or situations where we're getting away from those hunger fullness cues and getting away from more mindful eating, and engaging in something out of habit. So I think in order to manage these, one of the best things we can do is, again, identify the environment. Is it the place? Is it when I go home? Is it the person or the event? Like, what is setting me off? And is it a situation that I can avoid, or does it make sense to be more mindful in a situation like this, right? So what I want you guys to do today, and you can do this in real time, or you can take some time today to write through maybe a recent experience that you've had, or just an experience that you feel like is cyclical, like, oh, every year at Christmas, like Christmas is really freaking hard. Whatever it is, take some time to write through that experience and how we might handle it differently. And the guide that I want you guys to use as you do this is, number one, to identify the trigger, right? So as with many acts of change, awareness is going to be the first step. So identify the events, the people, and the situations that trigger negative emotions. And you can either work on, how do I avoid it, or how do I prepare for this to handle it better in the future? One way to do this is with a behavior chain analysis, right? So you're going to journal the chain of events that led up to an unwanted behavior. And again, that could be something that you notice happening today, or you can pull an example from your past and do this exercise that way as well. So write down, if you grabbed for food or avoided food in a certain situation, what happened before that? Who was involved? Where were you? What was the event? Was there an emotion tied to it? And this is going to provide some insight into what are the factors or the triggers that affect you, right? Other common triggers that we see outside of like the food itself, an emotion, or the environment, like just some more tangible examples could be like stepping on the scale, clothes shopping or grocery shopping, numbers about size, weight, or food intake, conversations about diets or weight loss, boredom, loneliness, stress, right? Those are all feelings, but I'm guessing some of those are going to land with most of you. So then once you identify it, so step 1 is identify. Step 2 is going to be interrupt the chain. Responding to a trigger is simply that. It's a response. It's involuntary, but you can change it. And the first step to changing it is delaying it. So when you're faced with a desire to eat or restrict or purge in some way, your first step is just to pause and then ask yourself what you're trying to avoid by eating, restricting, or purging, or whatever your kind of go-to response is. Okay, so that's it for today. Identify the trigger. How can you interrupt the chain? And if you're pulling from a past experience, totally fine. Write through what you could have done differently. And then let's look at using that in the future. Okay, so that's step 2 is delay it. Step 3 is I want you guys to write down a list of 8 to 10 things that you can do to cope with emotional or habitual situations that are not food. Okay, so when I am stressed out and I really just want to go house the chocolate bar, what can I do that is not going to involve food? So for me, I'm going to be like a little bit personal with it. Like, let's say it's, I'm upset. Past breakups would be a good example of times where I have probably had, like a bottle of wine because I didn't want to deal with the feelings, and then ordered some sort of comfort food. Generally, that's going to be higher carb for me. So like pizza or like Thai food. And probably didn't listen at all to the hunger fullness cues around it, right? And vegged out to I'm on the couch, I'm watching something so that I don't have to think about the experience that I'm going through right now because I'm not ready to deal with it. Not a healthy way to cope, right? On my list, things that actually have helped me move through that emotional experience: calling somebody. Usually that's my mom first, and then close friends. Going for a walk, petting the dog. It's not going to the gym for me. That's like too stressful. It's too much. I need more gentle. Coloring in like an adult coloring book. That's always a good one. Taking a bath with candles, all the candles. Cleaning sometimes is on the list. Okay, so these are just things that I've noticed like actually help me. Talking about it though is number 1. Like that's just hands down for me. You guys probably can identify some different ones for yourself, but go ahead and write that list out and then post it somewhere that you can see it. Okay, so 3 steps today: identify the trigger, figure out if you can delay your response to it, and then write your list of ways that you can delay that response or cope differently. Okay. All right. Have a good rest of your day. It's going to be a fun one. You guys are doing really big stuff here. And I will see you in the next one.